Hello and welcome to another episode of We Are Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for this evening. I have to be quiet because I'm actually sitting in a cabin in the kitchen in a cabin, and it's very, very dark. And I'm really, and there's a ticking clock. And there's a madman making noises upstairs. Because I'm going to drop this. I'm going to make some noise, and hopefully a wild Ben Maddox.
I'm a lynx.
Will you stop?
I'm a lynx.
I'm trying to build up atmosphere here. You ruinous man.
I'm just doing the Foley. I'm just doing the Foley.
You do. I've heard you do the Foley. And the Axel as well. And so joining me, he's a man who
I refuse to acknowledge. I refuse to acknowledge that joke.
Well, I don't care. Look at me. Je me refuse to refuse.
Je ne care pas.
Je ne care pas, Jimmy. This is the possibly the kind of the. It's like, you know that whole thing about the cat in the box? Well, this is like a box that's got lots of cats in it, and we're just opening it up and we're chucking the catnip in and we're going to see what happens, because this is what happens when you get two people that are used to speaking to other people in an interview type style. Because joining me for 5 games for Doomsday, it's the man, the machine. He's such a machine. He's got the letter X at the end of his name. Like he's some kind of futuristic cyborg come along to ask you questions.
I'm a sci-fi hero here to make your days better. Sorry, I don't know. I don't interrupt the introduction.
It doesn't matter. I usually ramble anyway, so that's fine. It's good that you've jumped in. It's Ben Maddox from 5 Games for Doomsday. Hi, Ben.
Hello. As I was coming to the tower,
yeah,
I passed some people and they said to me, "You want to watch that lad there? He's a wizard." And I said, I'm pretty sure he isn't, you know. I mean, that's what he told me. Expressly told me in the email. And I listened to his show the other day, and there was this, "We're not wizards," I heard at the beginning of the show. And I thought, well, I mean, that's all I need to hear. And by the way,
yes, love
the tower, love the spiral staircases. They're never going out of fashion.
They're actually really difficult to clean, to be honest. I mean, I know you're kind of like, oh, this is really, really nice, but the reason that spiral staircases and towers have cobwebs is because they're just an actual bugger to dust. I mean, getting into the nooks and crannies. I mean, you can get like one of those.
So it's not an atmosphere thing. It's not a deliberate atmosphere thing. You don't buy them in. I mean, literally, it's just laziness. Then.
Literally, it's not. It's just over a period of time. You know how difficult it is to you know how difficult it is to hoover a set of stairs. In general, no,
never.
You've never.
I mean, I live in the naked city. We don't have stairs in our flats here. We all live in apartments.
We don't have hoovers either,
and we all do drug exchanges and things. But who does the embroidery on your clothing? I mean, how all of those moons and stars and that hat? I mean, that's a hell of a point.
I'd like to probably let you into the secret, but it does involve, you know, the little man that appears at the beginning of the show has very deft fingers, and he has this, I don't know where he got it from, but he was just born with some kind of remarkable embroidering ability. So rather than try and push him down the local kind of normal kind of sports academic activities, we just let him embroider stuff, and he started off with squares and he started off with straight lines, and it's just given him kind of more complicated shapes to do. Now, one of the most complicated shapes to embroider is a star, and I just let him have a shot of my silk robe, and the next thing I knew, the thing was covered in stars. There's not any type of wizardry stuff going in here, Mr. Maddox.
I mean, the thing is, the fact that you're waving a oaken stick with a feather wrapped round the end at me, I mean, doesn't suggest anything to me. And you've got sort of various talking frogs jumping around behind.
It's just, look, the stick with the feather on it is a very, very old duster that was in the family, belonged to my grandmother, and therefore I don't replace it. The fact that it has the ability to...
And imagine the fact that it's old technology means you can't really do the spiral stairs. That's why the cobwebs are
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's just impossible. As I say, trying to take a Hoover up the spiral stairs at the same time as Hoover is practically an exercise in breaking your own legs. Where are we going with this? I have no idea. I'm stopping you for a second because I feel I have to stop you for a second because I have to say, first of all, thank you very, very much for agreeing to come on, because
that's no problem at all.
I've been looking forward to this since we actually arranged this, because I've been cramming in as many of your interviews as possible, and I was always interested in speaking to somebody like yourself because you do what I do, which is to speak to other people and find out information, which is why I was interested in some kind of clash. You're an actor by trade.
By trade.
So, I mean, was that going back to kind of like when you were a younger person? Was that something that you were always good at, or was that something that you fell into? Because I find that actors either you say, oh, he was the joker of the class, or it's like, well, I actually discovered once I got away from school and the confines of school and what I was doing, I ended up kind of getting involved in the kind of the creative media, the acting kind of scene, because I kind of came into my own. So where were you? Were you the kind of the little kind of, you the teacher kind of throwing chalk at you going, Maddox, will you behave and stop doing Charlie Chaplin in the middle of the classroom? You know, or were you the slow burner?
Well, it was one of those things. You know, it was one of those things where when I went to drama school, I remember speaking with loads of the people I went to drama school with. Yeah. And they were all like, I've always had a passion for theatre. I've been reading Stanislavski since I was 3. And the reason I went to drama school is because I was poor. Mm. And I think I really wanted to do writing more than I wanted to do acting. But I was good at acting, and I got I was good at acting and I was fucking lazy, basically, which meant I got an unconditional offer to go to drama school, which meant I didn't have to pass my A-levels. So I thought, well, I mean, I could work to pass my A-levels, or I could spend the last 3 months of my 6th form getting stoned, you know. So it was clear what I was going to do. And so I always loved acting. I was always good at it. And this is a relative term, because I realised when I went to drama school, which is incredibly interesting, because I came from a town of 3,000 people, right?
All right.
And so I was the best in the town, because there was no one in the town, apart from farmers and alcoholics, you know. And I got to drama school, and it was really sobering, because I was surrounded by these people who were amazing. You know, I mean, loads better than I will ever be, you know. And so it was one of those things. I was always good at it, and I always felt really comfortable in a theatre. Even if the play is crap, even if the money's crap, there's something lovely about arriving at the theatre at sort of 6 o'clock before an 8 o'clock kickoff. Yeah. And just sitting in the empty auditorium, facing the set, and just sitting there and thinking, wow, I like being here. And I probably like being here more than I like almost anywhere else in the world, apart from maybe at the foot of a hill or the shore of a lake. You know what I mean? But
did you find it natural? Was it easy for you to be acting? Because I know some people that, I know we joke before, it's like, oh, you know, do you want to do it? Well, I'll do it on the night. And it's like, well, it is the night. And it's like, whoa, okay, that's pretty good. But, I mean, when I was doing I know you're going to be like, oh, here we go. But I used to do kind of a lot of musical theatre. And I was the type of person I was pretty much the do it on the night type of person. I would get up, within kind of like, because the Amdram's like a hobby. And the reason it's a hobby is because people kind of take essentially a musical or a play that could probably be learned within a much shorter time, and they stretch it out over a 6-month period to give people somewhere to go on a Sunday evening or a Monday night.
Christ, I cannot tell you because I did a lot of Amdram when I was a teenager. And the length of time you have to rehearse the show and let the show gestate and all of that is just bloody wonderful. As a professional, because there's money involved.
Yeah.
And because you have to pay the people to be there and you have to hire the rehearsal spaces, you get no bloody time. I mean, I did a production in Vienna of The Mousetrap, and the rehearsal time was 2 weeks, and I was playing the policeman. And basically the policeman doesn't come on for the first 40 minutes, but then he comes on after about 40 minutes and then is on the stage for the next hour and 20 minutes and doesn't shut his mouth.
Yeah. And
having 2 weeks to rehearse that was unbelievable. I mean, absolutely. The first night comes and I'm thinking, do I know what I'm fucking talking about? Am I going to just ruin this? And, it was all right on the night. But I mean, what I really found out about being at drama school is that I think what drama school taught me is not to be a good actor. Because I think to a degree, acting talent is natural, which is why I'll never be top draw. I'll always be bang average. All professional standards, probably better than most people who act.
Yeah.
Because most people who act are amateur, but, bang average. But what drama school taught me was the discipline. And people think, acting is this louche profession where everyone's pissed all the time, and that to some degree is true, but actors are meticulously punctual, for instance.
Yes.
Actors really work hard. They do their job. I mean, the reason you're punctual as an actor, is, especially in England, is that if you're late, they sack you. Because the job that you've been hired for, there are 10,000 people in the country who would happily take it in an instant, so you just don't.
Yeah.
So you have to be disciplined. You have to be there and present and do your job. I can't remember what the question was, but I'm basically saying I am great. Give me money.
But is that your learning style? I mean,
I'm not a wizard.
But you probably are. I think we're going to establish that you're going to talk yourself into the fact that there's a question here about which one of us is a wizard, and I think by the end of it, they're going to answer, and they're going to walk away, and they're going to say, he's got the magical number 5 in his podcast name. That's the wizard kind of over there. They're going to be all pointing their fingers kind of at you. So, are you the type of actor that do you do character stuff? I mean, when you're learning stuff, is it a case that do you have to kind of go into character when you're learning stuff? Or are you the type of person that you would generally kind of learn the lines and then you would build it up to kind of build the character in? Because, you get different types of folk that, there's all different types of people that will say, right, okay, I need to learn the lines in my head and then I'll bring the character in afterwards. Or are you the type of person that says, right, okay, I'm 68 years old, I am doing this, and I'm going to bring the voice, I'm going to bring the characterization and everything like that, kind of what they call the kind of the methody type style? Or do you not get that luxury because you're on a gig and you're just trying to get paid?
Well, sort of as a professional, you generally don't get cast as people who are much older than you, much younger than you, much different than you.
Right.
So you usually generally get cast in a certain range.
Yeah.
But I'm one of those actors that has this sort of irrational thing, and I think a lot of actors feel this, that, I could be playing a child murderer, and if someone says, oh, your character's a bit of a despicable human being, I would go, no, you don't understand him. Actually, there are aspects to his character that aren't that bad. I'm one of those people who sort of really, I think the key is you kind of have to identify with your character. And a lot of the work I do when I'm getting into character, for want of a better phrase, is just kind of knowing who they are, identifying with them, and bringing those aspects of my personality that link up with their personality.
Yeah.
And I guess playing a character is an act of empathy, is understanding. So it's saying I am playing someone. So I'm playing Hitler, who is sort of objectively terrible.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've seen The Downfall.
Yes.
Right? But the way Bruno Ganz plays Hitler in that is he doesn't go, oh, I'm playing a villain. He says, I'm playing a human being who believes he's right, which makes that performance compelling.
Yes.
It makes that performance believable. And I think that's kind of the work that most actors do, is learning the lines is the sort of minimum requirement. What you do is the work you do away from the rehearsal room is thinking, who is this person? How would this person react to this situation? Do I know a situation in which I would react in a similar way? What does that mean? Do they laugh? Mm-hmm. Do they laugh when something bad happens to them? Do they cry? Do they scream? Do they shout? Do they go silent? And all of this sort of stuff. And the beauty about it is I tend to do it when I'm walking around and I'm walking to rehearsals and I run these ideas through my head and I say, who is this person and what do they do? What are they like? And all of this. And then when you get to the rehearsal space, I guess what the director's job to do is to say, you're saying that too quickly, you're saying that too slowly. Yeah. Maybe you should think about not being so angry here. The actor should, I guess, walk into the rehearsal room kind of with their intentions all sorted out.
Yes.
And it helps being an empathetic person, I suppose.
Yeah. So are you the type of person do you have to learn to take direction then, and that you almost criticism quite well? Kind of thing?
No. I'm very much a believer in the hierarchy of theatre.
Yeah.
I'm very much a believer in the fact that actors are movable props.
Yeah.
The director is the boss. Uh-huh. They are the dictator. And there's a phrase in theatre. It's TTFN, which is take the fucking note.
Yeah.
So if a director says to you, do it this way, and it's completely at odds with what you think the character is, yeah, you say, okay, cool. And that's your professional obligation.
Yeah.
Especially when you have no time to rehearse a show. If you can't hold up the show with your own fucking issues.
Yeah.
You have to just do what the director says, because your job as an actor fundamentally is to do what the director says. So, no, part of being a professional actor, I think, is understanding that when the director says, no, you do it this way, you go, fine, and you make that work for yourself.
So did you go into it kind of like... Did you go into it like a lot of people go into a professional kind of occupation, which is... Did you go in it with the aspirations of fame and fortune and all that, or were you quite a realist being involved kind of like in... I guess being involved in the educational establishment, getting educated, going to like, being trained kind of professionally and everything like that. Were you aware of how difficult it was going to be, the profession you were getting into? Did they knock that out you quite quickly at stage school to say like, okay, there's going to be 500 people turn up at this rehearsal and guess what? You're going to be number 300 because you're just not going to fit this role. Or, did they kind of knock that out you quite quickly, or is it something they let you kind of learn that you're going to get, failure's going to be there?
They can't. Drama school is wonderful in the sense that you have 3 years to focus solely on your craft, on your art, to really feel like an actor. Then you go out into the real world. And my first 3 years out of drama school, I had my heart broke over and over and over again for a myriad of reasons. It was absolutely horrendous. And I took it really poorly. I guess to some degree it's still true. I took rejection terribly, and I guess I still do to some degree. And so it was, they can't prepare you for that. And they can't prepare you. They can say to you, oh, you're going to be rejected for everything. The fact is, when you're at drama school, all you're thinking about is, when I leave drama school and I get a job at the RSC, when I leave drama school and I get a job in the new Steven Spielberg movie, when I leave drama school, it's all going to be wonderful. And then, for some people it is. Some people I went to drama school with who, and who were better than me, have had absolutely stellar careers.
Yeah.
And I haven't. I've scrabbled around in the basement. So as an example, I did a play reading the other night. And it was for a 9/11 truther conspiracy play.
Oh, right, okay.
And it was just a one-night reading in front of... basically, I didn't realise that this was a thing. The German 9/11 truther people all came to this play reading. And it was absolutely insane. And there was a Q&A afterwards. And one of the actors in the show was a true believer, right? And so he was, the government did it, and... they detonated the buildings to start the war in Iraq so Halliburton could make all this money, And, absolutely incredible. To the point, the last line of the play, the main character, who's this woman who's the main character of the play, looks at the audience and says, 9/11 was a coup d'etat. And... it was an awful play as well. It was an awful play. It was like the guy had gone onto an Alex Jones website, copy and pasted stuff into scenes. Really terrible stuff. And this is what you do. It's interesting. It doesn't pay any money, and you sort of scrabble around in the basement. You scrabble around in the basement of acting, and most of the work I do is voiceover stuff, which is quite well paid, but it's corporate, vacuous stuff. It's not... If someone says to you, when you leave drama school, what do you want to do? Yeah, I want to do a 30-second video on how to use a pallet in a factory. You don't. But, it's well paid, and it exercises the skills you've learned to do as a craftsman. So... I've had very many interesting times as an actor, and many terrible times, and many barren and fallow times, and it's just the nature of being a working actor, I guess.
Do you not think of backing out? Have you got to the point where you've kind of went, do you know what? This is just,
all the bloody time. And the point is, it usually coincides with, I'll do a performance and it's crap. Or, so at Christmas, I did a production of A Christmas Carol and I just hated it. It was poorly paid. I didn't get on with any of the cast, and I didn't think I was very good in it either. And, I sort of thought, well, maybe it's time to put up the old acting boots and think about something else. And then your agent calls you and said, you've got a job on Tuesday at a recording studio to do a voiceover for a VW YouTube video. And you go, oh, okay, because it's going to pay you money. So all the time I think about quitting, but, it's... when people are paying you to do something that's just so bloody great, even if it's not exactly what you envisage, you do it because that's what you live for, I guess.
Is that what pushed you into kind of creating your own stuff, to kind of bring back a little bit of control, so that you were not a case of you weren't relying on the creativity of others, that you were actually kind of saying, right, okay, I am going to decide what's kind of going out there. I am essentially deciding the words, the script, the direction myself. Was that kind of, what kind of drove you to say, right, okay, I'm going to start, the podcast, or start my own kind of little creative avenue?
Well, I've written for years. I've written a book which is sitting on my hard drive, 100,000 words, 7 years of work, and it's just sitting on my hard drive, and I haven't done anything with it yet. But
what's that about? No, stop! You can't say you've written a book and then attempt to move on to something else. What is this book?
It's a loosely connected set of short stories about people living in a small country town in the west of England, essentially.
All right, okay.
And it's just sort of the struggles of being in the middle of nowhere, being a human being, and trying to navigate through the world, and how bloody difficult it is,
But are you always done creative things then?
Yeah,
has it always been something you've been doing then? I mean, is you actually getting into like the podcasting side of things, is that just a natural kind of evolution for you? Was that always going to happen?
It's one of those things, isn't it? I never really thought about doing a podcast till I got into board gaming. And then when I got into board gaming, I thought, there's an avenue here. I mean, I guess initially it was sort of like, God, without sounding dreadful, I kind of thought, there's something I can do here that people aren't doing. Yes. That's a bit more interesting. And I mean, this is my third board game venture as a podcast. And the other two sort of didn't work out for whatever reasons. And, if you want to get into that at some point, I'm willing to dish as much dirt as you want. But this one, I want to do interviews with people in the industry, but I don't want it to be marketing. I'm just not interested in, although inevitably it becomes that. I'll explain the premise to the listeners who may not know the show. So basically the idea is I get people from the board gaming world. I've done Ignacy Trzewiczek, Rana Knizia, and it's basically Desert Island discs. So they have Doomsday has come and they've had to flee to a cabin in the woods and they can only take 5 of their games with them. And through that, you sort of learn about who the person is, what are their origin story. With certain people, I go off into other areas that aren't gaming and talk about their careers and things like this. Other people like Rana Knizia, because he's like a legend in the industry, it's very sort of gaming focused. And through these interviews, I'm not interested. I mean, if people want to pimp their latest game, that's fine. But I tell them beforehand, this isn't going to be an hour of marketing. I want something interesting. I'm going to talk about things that I think people would be interested in about you as a person. Now, at the end, if you want to crowbar in, buy my game tomorrow, that's all good. But I found that mostly board game media was reviews or what's your new Kickstarter, which is fine, but I'm just not interested in doing that. And because I came off a project which was a partnership that ended really sourly, sort of publicly sourly too, I thought I want to do something. I mean, as much as to say to my former partner, fuck you, as much as anything. I want to do something, but I have to do it on my own because I just don't trust anyone else, certainly at the moment. So I want to do it on my own. So what can I do? And I came up with this idea and I thought that's a nice idea. And I can I know loads of interesting people. Through the last podcast, I got to know a lot of really super interesting people. And so I thought, great, I'll do that. And it means I take more of a back seat, but at the same time, that's fine because frankly, who the fuck am I?
Yeah. I mean, I see where you're coming from.
Sorry about this as well. You're probably going to have to beep this or put an E rating. But
no, it doesn't fucking matter.
Boom.
I mean, that's where I was kind of aiming for. I think it happens sometimes, and it does. It doesn't happen sometimes. It depends on the nature of the person. I mean, I don't. I get asked the question all of the time when we have the interview, right? What are we going to talk about? What are their main points of discussion? And I don't know if it's because other people put together exhaustive show notes and say, here's the 5 points we want to talk about. And normally my show notes go along this lines. First of all, I very rarely give show notes apart from the kind of the housekeeping stuff to say, this is how we record.
Yeah.
And on the other side of it, I never try and lead people. I think if people have a story, that kind of story naturally comes out. And sometimes it's about making people kind of feel comfortable in the conversation, because not everybody, and you forget this sometimes, that not everybody that's appearing on a podcast is doing it because they want to. Some people are appearing on the podcast because they've been told as part of, the they're exercising marketing to help their game. They should be speaking to X number of people in order to help kind of get the exposure. So there's a lot of people that aren't comfortable when they come on the show. And I think
Christ, you're dealing with board game people, and it's not I don't want to say that all board game people are socially awkward, but I mean certainly there's a constituency in board gaming of people and designers that I've met who are lovely people, but are not comfortable in front of a microphone and not comfortable in front of a camera.
No.
So it is an issue, obviously.
And it's finding where they are comfortable, and sometimes it's like it means leading them into a conversation which has nothing to do with what they're there to talk about. And sometimes you'll find, I mean, I usually aim to record for an hour, and I usually aim to edit out as little as possible, because I think sometimes it takes away from the general conversation. But I mean, sometimes I will start off a conversation and we won't even speak about or talk about board games for that length of time. It'll be a conversation like this. I'll be talking about you, and I think that makes you kind of comfortable to a point where it then moves it away. It's like the whole Christian Guru Murphy thing, talking with Richard Ayoade about kind of talking about his book and saying, I have to ask you a serious question in order so that we can talk about the advert and, that kind of thing. But I don't know. I think that, I didn't get into this trying to be something different,
We're very different in our styles. We were sort of talking about this off mic, but I write almost every question I ask is pre-written. Just because I don't like to walk a tightrope without a net. Whereas you seem completely comfortable with that, and that's great. And I think it elicits a slightly different product, if you know what I mean. So
yeah.
And this is not a qualitative thing. I think what you do is great. I've been listening to you a lot over the last few days, and it's really not difficult to do, as you put out about 37 podcasts an hour, and
35 this week, because it is a shorter month in February.
Exactly.
So scheduling,
But it's one of those things where I listen to your interviews, and they to give a sort of popular sort of comparison, they feel much more like a sort of Joe Rogan sort of thing, where the mics go on, there's no pre-planning, you just, you're sat opposite an interesting person, let's have a conversation. Whereas I'm sort of very focused on kind of what it is about that person I want to talk about, and I'm scared shitless that I'm going to get sort of 20 minutes in and they're just going to clam up, because I don't have the reservoirs of creativity that you do. I mean, I assume it's some sort of Patronus that you conjure up.
It's I mean, in a technical sense, it's not, it's kind of a CB thingy. It's a subliminal message spell that we send. You haven't noticed it, but potentially you are able to be in a relaxed state and you are able to just filter your mind. It's kind of taught very early on at wizard school to persuade people to not think you're a wizard. So, it's, you're technically kind of under a spell, but it's kind of a relaxing type thing. So it kind of works.
Frankly, any attention is good attention, even if you're manipulating me mentally. That's fine.
I think it's fine. I mean, you will find a lot of wizards are in sales, because generally, the art of persuasion is something that a wizard kind of does very, very, very well. Have you been in the situation where you've had to kind of drag out the conversation into a different direction where the questions haven't entirely worked? Or have you been in a situation where you've asked one question and it's like you're like the little Dutch boy taking his finger out the dam and everything is just flooded and almost washed you away?
There are some people, and actually to their credit, most of them. So I do extensive editing on my show. I edit out. I like to have some shows. It's just inevitable; they're going to be longer. But I like to sort of have between an hour and 15 minutes, and so I edit to that. And actually, most people say you're going to have to bear with me. I talk a lot, if they talk a lot. Mostly, people are great. Occasionally, you'll ask a question that just bombs, and they'll give you a one-word answer. I'm usually good at following up on that, improvising, and say, so why does that answer merit that? No, it's actually, I have found mostly that it's more of an issue of people not shutting up as opposed to people clamming up and not answering questions. I think people love talking about themselves, right? And rarely get the opportunity. And I think within the board game world, because it's such a nascent industry, because it's only sort of clambering out of the sort of ad hoc amateur world into sort of professionalism, you find these people who are, the equivalent of New York Times best-selling authors who've never done a bloody interview before, or have done very few interviews. And once you get them warmed up, I think they love it. I mean, it was really interesting when I interviewed Rainer Knizia. For the first 5 minutes, I thought this is going to be an absolute bloody disaster. I thought he was being quite sort of German, quite robotic, quite sort of by the numbers. But after a while, he warmed up and he was absolutely fascinating. I mean, really one of the best interviews I've done, not because I was skilled in any particular way. And in the same way, I think you developed quite a sort of relaxing atmosphere. I think the way I do it is momentum. I keep asking questions until I hit on something that people are going to talk about,
Yeah, I do deal with people. I mean, you talk, the person that's all of a sudden discovered you got a New York Times bestseller. I am sometimes speaking to people who have gone from absolutely nothing to all of a sudden running a 6-figure Kickstarter campaign.
Right.
That all of a sudden they have, somebody said, right, they all of it. I mean, there's a list of people, your Frank West who did City of Kings, there's Mark Neidlinger, who did Vindication, and they went, and Peter Blenken at Subterra, and they went from running, putting a Kickstarter out there like everybody does, expecting a funding goal of 10,000 whatever, and they romped home at 6 figures, and all of a sudden people are picking up on their campaign and they're getting asked to be on interviews, or somebody says they should be going and doing interviews, and they're like, I'm just a board game designer, I have no idea how to really speak about it. And then they enter into the kind of the robotic kind of, I'm just going to talk about, I'm comfortable with the gameplay, I'm comfortable talking about the mechanics, I'm comfortable talking about the design process. And I think my way to look at it is I'm interested in the person behind it, because I'm always conscious that, and maybe this is where my ego comes in, is I'm always conscious of maybe the last couple of podcasts I've been in, that's all that's happened, is all they've been asked about is the gameplay, all they've been asked about the mechanics, and nobody's actually asking, well, shit, you're doing like you've done $100,000 in like the space of 2 days. How are you feeling about that kind of thing? Where are you mentally? Are you sure,
I mean, my goal is to do the exemplary interview of these people, to sort of, I mean, without wanting to sound hugely pretentious, to have this sort of notion that if, when, God forbid, Rainer Knizia dies, and people say, who was this guy? They can go back, and there is something there that is a record of who the person was, what they did, and what motivated them as an artist. And this is the thing, I think I see board game designers as artists, and so I approach them in that way. So I want to know about their motivations. I want to know about their process, because I'm super interested in that myself. When I think of J.G. Ballard, he went to his writing desk at midday, and every hour he would ring on a bell and someone would bring him a scotch, and he'd have a scotch at the top of each hour when he was writing. And, Roald Dahl would sort of walk out into his garden, and he had a shed. I mean, a posh shed, but nevertheless, a shed in which he wrote all of his stuff. All of that stuff is super fascinating to me. And I mean, you had, Elizabeth Davidson on, who is, if we're talking about New York Times bestsellers, I mean, she had an article in the New York Times just the other day. And Wingspan is this huge I don't know, board game equivalent of White Teeth by Zadie Smith. This thing that just explodes. And suddenly she's gone from, it's really interesting reading the New York Times article because she had a super interesting career just outside of board gaming, but suddenly she's become this name that is on everybody's lips, and this thing is, changing. This idea of scientifically rigorous board games, they've been around for ages, but I don't think any have sort of touched the zeitgeist in the way that Wingspan has. And it's going to presage this sort of, I assume, cavalcade of scientifically rigorous games that deal with biology and chemistry. And I think that's just fantastic. And you get to, and because board gaming is so bloody parochial and still sort of climbing out of the ad hoc into the professional, you get to speak to these people. I know Ignacy Trzewiczek, and what people don't realize with Ignacy is he essentially invented gaming in Poland. Before the Iron Curtain fell, there was nothing. And he was the first RPG writer that came in Poland. He is essentially Polish gaming, which is bloody incredible, right? An absolute living legend.
Yeah. The thing with Elizabeth is it's kind of been like a perfect storm. And it's interesting, the circumstances that are surrounding the game, that they're getting so much publicity because she was, I think she was involved in politics.
Yeah.
When I was speaking to her, that's what she did. And she says that was my professional career. And then she got into her professional career working in the government. And she turned around and she went, this is rubbish. I don't like doing this. And then she fell into kind of board games and that. And then she's kind of made Wingspan. And I think the interesting thing is I've already seen comments about people are saying, well, Wingspan, is it going to be still here in kind of like 6 months? And it's a case of, well, it's probably going to be here in a couple of years because it's very rare that something that gets that much exposure kind of into the public domain kind of just disappears. But it would be interesting to see. But I guess my conversation with her was we didn't talk about the gameplay, how you played Wingspan at all. Because I was going to be aware there was going to be so much media coverage of gameplay videos and review video, and I was just like, and I mentioned it to her afterwards. I says, I purposefully stayed away from actually talking about the game.
It's one of my bugbears. It's one of my bugbears, and I went on Twitter in a rare sort of act of frustration. I know it works for some people, but I don't like to air my grievances on Twitter. I think it's unseemly. But Christ, I write reviews, and I write a weekly review. And sort of the structure of my reviews are very much sort of how you'd read a movie review or a book review. They're meandering, They take a sort of, my sort of structure is I take a central concept and then I elaborate on that concept and how it applies to this particular game. And Christ, the criticism I get, some people say, this isn't a review. I've no idea how to play the game. And I'm like, I'm not here to explain the fucking rules. Go and watch a Rodney Smith video. Read the bloody rule book. I'm here to tell you what the experience of the game is like, what the game does to you, how it fires the neurons in your brain or doesn't fire the neurons in your brain. Frankly, I think the board game industry has slightly been damned by the first sort of big reviewer. The structure of their reviews is, they give you the rules of the game and then some comments on it. I'm not interested in telling you the rules of the game. You can find those things yourself. I'm much more interested in telling you how the game affects you, how the game affects me, and if you sort of have any sort of empathetic reaction to that, how it will affect you. Talking about how the game plays, and you take 3 cards and then you roll some dice and then you put the dice here on. It's just the antithesis of what a board game review should be. It's the antithesis of what a board game interview should be. There are rule books to do it, right?
But you used to see, back in the days of the early kind of video game and computer game days, you used to see that. You used to see it was the same kind of thing. It wasn't until, I think it was like the Edge magazine came out where they kind of started to drift into kind of like the emotional kind of response. And I think that's the maturity that board game media needs to grasp on, is the kind of like getting into the point where it's kind of like, this is how this game is going to make you feel. You know, it's like if I wrote something, say, about, like, say, Letters from Whitechapel, I would probably talk about the tension that was created in the room with the police trying to find Jack the Ripper. There's no point in going, because the mechanics themselves are fairly dull. You know, have you ever write it down?
Have you ever read a fucking rule book? Christ, it's boring. I mean, most of the writing in board gaming is terrible, but I mean, even the flavor text is usually dreadful. But at the same, and also rulebooks are technical manuals. There's a reason people don't take the instruction manual to a Hoover to bed with them and read it, right? It's not interesting. I mean, it's slightly different with board game rules, I guess, in the sense that you can imagine the fun you may have. But I've never been one of those people who can read a rulebook and say, oh no, I know whether I'm going to like this game or not. I mean, the fun I extract from a game bears no relevance to how the rules are as written to me. And so, you know, an explanation of the rules tells me nothing unless it's someone like Rodney Smith or Paul Grogan, who I don't watch their how to play videos for entertainment. I have the game, I want to know how to play the game, so I'll watch their video. It's purely utilitarian. And I think the way we talk about games needs to change from utilitarian to criticism, whatever that means. But talking about how the games affect you as opposed to how they play. Because that's not bloody interesting, fundamentally. And I think it will change. And it's starting to change with the shift in game themes, something like Holding On, which is just the most incredible thing to come out of gaming ever. Oh, you're holding it in your hand.
I'm holding it in my hand. It's on my mic. It's on my mic.
I mean, such an audacious and brave and absolutely shattering experience of a game. What cinema is, what video games are, board gaming is becoming, and I think the commentary around it will become that too. And I hope that I'm contributing to that. That's my absolute intention, to write things that are engaging and interesting. And frankly, I love the interviews and I think they're valuable, but I'm in it for the writing. It's the writing that really fires my cannon.
But the Holding On is a perfect example of a review of a game that needed some kind of emotional input in it and how it made the player feel. Because I've read reviews that talk about the mechanics of how you play The Troubled Life of Billy Kerr, and if they're measuring the game by the mechanics and how it plays, I've seen complaints of people saying it's bloody unfair. It's really, really unfair. It's such a frustrating game. You get halfway through kind of playing and then all of a sudden it's like the deck's against you and you just lose. And that makes it frustrating and terrible. And yet they're missing out the key fact of the story and the emotions and everything that's built around it. And it's like, it is one of these games that I think, if you talk about the mechanics and whether, you're plotting a graph is, are the mechanics fun of it against it, are the mechanics effective? It's like you're going to miss out on the key point of this game. And the people that have reviewed it and really liked it and been passionate about it have said, it is the story that involves around it. It's the, it's how it affects you, kind of thing.
I'm a Eurogamer. I love rigorous mechanics. But I remember I was playing Holding On, and there's this one card, and he stood in the kitchen on the phone, a pudgy middle-aged bloke in a pink t-shirt and boxer shorts, and he's talking on the phone to someone. And I just looked at that card and I thought, Christ, You never see that in a board game. Something that is just unremittingly honest, and something that is just a snapshot, a moment of a person's life taken and given to you to deal with. What is he talking on the phone about? You can see by his posture it's not good. You can see something has happened. And let's be frank, you'll get phone calls in your life delivering news that you never want to hear. News that is going to rip your heart out of your body. And that card said that to me. Is it his wife saying, I'm leaving you? Is it his daughter saying, I hate you? Is it a nurse phoning up saying, your father's passed away? Who knows? But that sort of evocation of the pure human experience is something that board gaming needs. Not all the time. I'm happy to sell fucking tomatoes. But at the same time, I want something that is going to do the same to me that playing Coming Home, the video game, does. Something that... Yes. Yeah. You know, something that does the same to me that L'Amour by Michael Haneke does. Board gaming has the ability to elevate itself to pure, profound art. And it's something like Holding On, and I will always talk about this game. It's something like Holding On that has that aspiration, and that's really positive. And I think it's the explosion of board gaming, that it's becoming more and more popular, that it's attracting all of these different kinds of people who want to tell you different stories, that is making it so vibrant. And I guess part of what I want to do in reaction to that, in the terms of the criticism that I do, is to aid that. Because I think critics are bottom feeders in every industry. I don't think that's... The artists do, the critics criticize. But one thing critics can do is say to the rest of the world, look, this is valuable, this is vibrant, this is something that can tell you what it is to be a human being in a world where, frankly, I mean, the fundamental injustice about being human is that you'll die one day. And the injustice is that you bloody know it's going to happen. And art is a way of dealing with that fundamental injustice. And board games, something like Holding On, deals with that. And I think it's wonderful. I think it's an absolutely wonderful, laudable thing, and we need more of it.
Yeah, I know. And I've got this. I've got Heroes of Land, Air and Sea. So when I want to go about and hit people over the head, I'll play that. But right. It's one of these things, I'm looking forward to playing this with a couple of different people just to see kind of how they react. And I would usually look at a game of playing a game with a couple of people because they would like the mechanics, not necessarily because of the emotional experience that it might get from it. So that's where I'm kind of looking with this game to say, well, is it the type of game I could sit down with my wife and say, okay, I know it's a difficult subject matter, but do you want to play this as a game? A normal thing would be, I don't want to play games. Just, I'll burn them if you come near me again with a board game. Whereas this might be something I can say, well, look, this is a kind of a more emotional story-based type journey with, obviously there's some mechanics in there that we'll have to learn together, but I think that could be very, very interesting. On the other side, I'm not going to bring, say, Heroes of Land, Air and Sea to the table, because I know that it'll just be like, there's not a chance it's ever gonna kind of happen.
And the thing is, board gaming should be like every entertainment medium. Sometimes you want to watch sort of comic book shit. Sometimes you want to watch a quiz show. Sometimes you want total vacuity. And then sometimes you want something serious, something profound, something that is going to try and answer questions about what it is to be a human. There is room for all of this stuff. I'm a massive fan of trick-taking games. And there's no trick-taking games out there that are telling me about the problems of bereavement, and that's perfectly fine, because what I get from a trick-taking game when I play it for an hour is being utterly engrossed in something that is familiar and comforting. And games can be absolutely everything. And if people want to ignore this new wave of games that have some sort of deeper connection to art or whatever, they're perfectly fine to do that too. It is fundamentally an act of recreation, and that's cool too, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I saw there was always a bit of a backlash when we got the release of games like Life is Strange and Gone Home and things like that in the video game space. You know, there were like people were saying this is just some kind of arty type nonsense that isn't a proper, where's my gun? It's a walking simulator, which seemed to be something that kind of came out. So it's interesting to see kind of where that kind of thing kind of goes. I mean, with regards to yourself, would you go more into the media? I mean, would you do kind of more kind of video type thing? Because from the podcasts that you do, which are fantastic, everything from the Guild that I've been listening to through to the interviews, to the reviews, because I mentioned this the other day, but the best thing about the reviews on the podcast are they're short, they're sharp, and they're different, and they're really, really interesting. But would you go to the next level and start doing the kind of the types of videos? Because I would put up your style next to kind of the shut up and sit down, where you would explain the stuff, but it'd be very not kind of dry, and this is the mechanics and this is the positives and negatives. Shut up and sit down generally kind of get into kind of a little bit more of an emotional kind of involvement, what they actually think the player might kind of think and feel when they play the game.
Well, it's one of those things, isn't it? Tonight's experience. So before I spoke to you, I'd arranged to do a live stream. And then I realised, as the time for the live stream kicked up, that I needed a third-party software to stream at all. And I realised I had no bloody idea how to do it. So part of my issue with video, audio is so controllable.
Yeah.
It's, especially, I'm completely skint all of the time, so I've never got any money. And audio's wonderfully controllable. I don't know. I would like to go into video at some point. Certainly not in the sense with my podcast. It would require maybe my podcast in a sort of shortened form, but I'm cautious at the moment because I don't know what I'm bloody doing, and I don't just want to do something. I don't want it to look shitty, essentially. That's my main goal is I want it to sound good, professional, structured, worked upon. I want to do something that is good, not just there. And so my concern with video is I don't have the equipment and I don't have the expertise as yet. But as I go on into the future, and if my crowdfunder increases and I'm able to sort of, I think before I do video, I would quite like to at least do a course on how to deal with a DSLR. What are they called? DSLR? Is that what they're called?
Yes,
one of those
I think so.
Swanky cameras.
I know the ones you're talking about. Yeah, the swanky camera. Swanky camera will do.
Exactly. I'd at least like to do a course so I know how to use that rather than just stick stuff on my face and go, "Oh, all right, here's Ben. How's it going?" And people can't see me and stuff. So it's
you'd have to have a hat. And you'd have to have a bit of
corn
sticking out your mouth like that. I'm here to talk about
I'm in the
troubled
field.
life of Billy Kerr.
So this bloke like Billy Kerr, he's a right miserable old bastard, isn't he? Just because he had an heart attack, he needs to bloody cheer up, doesn't he? Thanks you for listening to my review.
Out in a tractor and stuff like that, Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
When my bloody combine broke down, I didn't moan. I got on with it.
You didn't moan at all.
You
got straight up again.
I fixed the bugger, and then I did the top field. So Billy, shut your bloody mouth.
You haven't given me my spanner back, though. You haven't given me my spanner back. I'm still looking for that. Don't pretend you haven't stolen it.
That's because I stuck it up my ass.
I'll come and get it later then, won't I? Because it is Tuesday. I don't know where to go after we've talked about sticking tools for tractors into bottoms. if people want to keep an eye on where you exist on the internet webs, where do you exist on the internet webs, Mr. Maddox?
On all of the webs. So the most important ones, because I try to engage with Facebook, but frankly, fuck Facebook. Twitter at 5game. Indeed. You can't find the spanner where I've stuck it in Facebook. So it's at 5 Games for Doomsday on the Twitters. My website is 5gamesfordoomsday.com. And yeah, all of the stuff's there. I've got interviews with some of the greatest people in gaming. I've got reviews of some of the greatest games in gaming and all of that sort of gubbins. Go there. Follow me, listen to my show, and furnish me with your cash.
Yes, go to Patreon. Is it patreon.com/5 Games for Doomsday, isn't it?
5G for D.
5G for D. So Ben does stuff. It's like us, but it's imagine if us went away for a bit and actually got a bit of an education about us and knew what we were doing. That's Ben.
Just imagine if this was a podcast hosted by someone who isn't a wizard.
Imagine. Imagine that indeed. Thank you for that.
He just flicked the V's at me for all the American listeners.
It was
that won't mean anything to you.
Bird. No, it was like, it was my magic wand. And what we'll do is we'll take those links and we'll put them in the show notes so we've got notes to show if you want to keep an eye on what
you bloody will. I'm only here for the publicity.
Exactly. And to sell my new book. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, go to the internet, search for We're Not Wizards, you'll find us. Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and our website and our blog and other places. If you like us really, really lots, we are on Patreon as well. But give money to Ben.
Oh, give it to me first. Literally, I'm skint. Believe me.
Just give it to Ben. But then if you want to do something for us, there's 2 things you can do. First of all, go and tell somebody else about us, Secondly, go into the Apple Podcast, consider giving us a rating or a review. If you are going to be giving us a rating or a review, search 5 Games for Doomsday and give that a rating, but don't give it 10 stars. Because that'll make Ben big-headed. But don't give it 1 star, because that'll make him cry. Give him 5, because it's in the middle, and it's a bit average. And Ben,
and nothing if not average.
Lying if not average, just like our good selves. That's not true because he's not average, is he? He's been absolutely wonderful. He's been absolutely fantastic, and we thank you so much.
He's praying at me now.
Some time with us.
Why are you praying at me?
I'm going to moon at you in a second.
Don't infect me with your Presbyterianism.
You're lucky I'm not wearing my magic kilt. There's only a couple more things to do. First of all, thank you very, very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, sir.
Also, I've learned some new spells. I've got a new robe. It's very exciting.
There you go. Exactly. You can levitate because we did that before the show.
And I can sit in a glass box on a bridge for no reason.
And if you've not got a glass box, you can pretend to be in one as well.
Oh my God, are you in a glass box?
No. That might be miming magic.
That might be the finest mime I've ever seen. Bearing in mind that mime is the literally fucking worst thing that's ever existed, puts that mime into context.
Oh dear, there's only 2 more things to do. Just to remember that we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Ben?
The jury's out as far as I'm concerned. With that mime, who knows? Patronus!
Thank you. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from the rather wonderful, the rather fantastic, the rather questionable Ben Maddox. Say goodbye, Ben.
Auf Wiedersehen.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe. Roll 6s. And I mean, if you are interested in finding out what various people would take as their 5 games for Doomsday, and then get to the end of your podcast where you're interviewing the guy who runs the 5 games for Doomsday podcast, realizing that you haven't actually asked him what games he would take for Doomsday, then you'll be in this situation being a sad little kind of petunia like me. But until the next time, goodbye.
Kaka.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.